All right, let's get into designing the world and building the world. So this shows you on the timeline how the sequence was playing out, and it was fairly easy. It's really light because it may seem like this is pretty dense. You got a ship, you got a planet, you got space, but this is really quite a simple scene. But before we get into all that detail, just want to walk you through the process of how I set this up, just how I set up my projects. So I basically make this map folder, and these are the maps, which are basically the levels. And that's kind of the background. That's where everything is built. And then this is another folder that's called the sequencers, which is actually the shots. And this has all the animation, the camera, and and various aspects. So these two come together. They actually, so you have like your map level, and then you have your sequencer. And so I create this little shot list as I was going. This is a little showing a little bit in advance of what was created later on as I was going. But basically, this is very important. This is a way of writing down once you understand your shots what they are. And I'd start off with this when it was even rudimentary, and then it would just evolve with stills and also what everybody was doing on the side, so little notes. So it kind of kept it organized. So this is kind of part one of like developing as you go your your project. It's good to have like, and that was just a Google Doc that basically laid out the shot list. But it would be easier when I knew I was going to have a lot of different shots, a lot of different levels, and without having some kind of a document, it was going to be hard to find. Now I'm showing you here, this is Perforce. Perforce is another way so that we work with a team. So if it's just you, you don't need this. But if you're working with a team, and say they're not even all local, you're not in the same building, but even if you are, Perforce is really powerful for working on projects together. And I just showed you how I kind of logged in on Perforce. And what that is just basically it's a place where everything gets saved. Everybody can work on the same project at the same time, and you can always like go back and modify it as it goes too. So, um, all right. So this scene, this is how simple this scene is. This whole background here, the planet, even some of the space was just put onto a grid or a plane. And so this is kind of old school, like matte painting, but it's doing it in Engine. Um, so where that starts is that here's in Photoshop. This is kind of the process. Just want to walk you through the thinking behind it. This is the layers. So this is basically a layers of everything that can be animated, tweaked. So it's always good when you're actually creating this to think in layers and also title them correctly. Um, so this was it started off, that's the background, there's the planet, and this is based on some NASA photos of Earth and just colored it slightly different. Hurricanes, various things that created this image. So here is like, this is the base part of what that image was. It was like a really cool, like if you go to nasa.com, they have like a library of images. And so this is taking that image we just saw and I colorized it to give it more like, uh, kind of Tatooine quality. Um, but it was high fidelity. It's a lot of detail. I think it was like some ridiculous like 6K. And then I just looked at various things like hurricanes and also looking at inspiration from movies like Prometheus or Alien Covenant. Um, it's always good to see like things as you go, and I'll talk about that more about like inspiration is a big part of a workflow. It's extremely important to have a um, reference and also just inspiration. So basically, this is just it's an easy plane. It's a primitive plane that this was projected onto. Um, it you created like a shader for it, which is really easy. It's like a node-based shader inside Unreal. Um, so able to apply, uh, the textures and also the goal here is basically to create um, the planet in space. I just wanted to simplify it so I didn't have any like weird planing and overlapping elements. And then what I'm doing here is I'm just breaking out the different components of like spec and everything else, so it's flat, matte, and then I bring that same image plane that diffuse, and I put it into the emissive color. That way, it actually illuminates. It's not. I don't really necessarily have to light it at all. It's self illuminating. Then you save that out, and that's the background. I mean, it's really that simple. Um, there's various things like I'm showing you like the media player. You could do animation. On top of that, there was a bit of exploration using After Effects to animate it. Also, this grid and this plane that I created with Planet is so huge that I could push it far back and create effects around it, like atmosphere, lightning, all that stuff. And I felt like I had a lot more freedom if I could do it in Engine, opposed to rendering it out. Again, this is the beauty of Unreal, is creating um, all these effects, everything in Engine, and not having to do it outside, except for again, the Photoshop component that I showed you, building the image. But when you start to modify stuff, say animating like the clouds or the lightning in After Effects, you bring it in, then you may lose, like you may want to tweak it, and you don't really have to go back and forth. So I'm not a fan of having to go back and forth. I like to have the flexibility and create everything in Engine. Um, so what I'm showing you there is just various effects. This planet had, as we'll see further, it's like this kind of a weird storm element that's a living organism that can change time. And that's what some of the effects are, and they're actually all over the planet. As well as like, lightning, which you can get, again, on the marketplace. That's where all this came from. Um, the effects that I showed you before that we'll get into a little bit more with the uh, the time effect that the planet is made of, or a life form on it. Those were a modified particle effects combined with various things. So this is lightning fast is the software or the the effect that we're using, which I got on the marketplace, and then you can go in and tweak it. But it's really cool. It's a great place for lightning. There's a distortion in it. It also is illuminating areas, which is great. Um, so it's really easy to use. You just what I did is I scaled it down, put it where I wanted it in the clouds, and it gave the effect I wanted. You can see as I scroll through, like how it's just everything seems to be working. Now, there's another thing too that, and it's interesting. I didn't really have time when I was doing this, is to create like a star uh, in the background, like a sun. Um, there is like obviously where an area for it, but I'm going to show you how easy that is. Um, this is the process. It's funny. When I go back and I start to realize, damn, I wish I had more time. I could have created this or whatever. Um, so these are like various like flares. Again, for the marketplace, there's a great resource of flares from various artists that have created these assets, and just go through and I find one that will work for me. Um, so this particular one, there's various ones. This is a particle based one, which is kind of cool because in that way it's like I don't have to apply it onto a card or anything like that. It's kind of self-contained, but it's illuminated, and I can scale it up. Um, kind of push put it exactly where I want it, which is pretty cool. Obviously, I want it far enough back that it feels like it's as the camera moves, that it's not floating around. So that's another component to always think about, like um, the distance it is from the camera. See, as I move, it's not far enough back. Uh, so I do it till it's basically just almost going through the plane. It's almost right at the edge of the plane. Obviously, probably a faster way is just zoom out and place it there, but um, I kind of wanted to see where I was putting it, scaling it up, and and then it also adds like another like a cool flare that kind of comes in. So now we have like a fun like sun element that's back there. Now this a lot of these things, these effects have other components that you can adjust. So going through and just finding where you want it to adjust. There's other aspects of like flares beyond just the major flare, but um, the lens flare that would also be created from that. So going into the shader, so of this flare, then it allows for other variations on, or other variables, like scale of different components of it, which is always good to have that kind of control. Again, like this is what's the beauty of this, opposed to having to create this from scratch uh, and do all the mechanics that of putting this together. There's an endless amount of resources out there. What I've done is collected quite my favorites, and I repurpose them, reuse them, and adjust them. But this is cool too because it has its own like lens flare on top of the sun itself, the flare. So it's like, and you can adjust that. Um, there's other ways of adjusting this too in the post processing, where you can actually, and that's where you're getting the flare on the ship. It's from the post processing. Um, it's its own process here. There's also bloom. Bloom is a good one for creating another various areas that are less, um, that you want to basically glow. So here I'm showing you this the lens flare. So this is just how we're adjusting in the post processing, which is just it's an effect that you add on, and you always want to in your scene add a post processing component because you also it adjusts the exposure of the scene. So but you have all these little cool variable elements in here like bloom and lens flare, dirt on the lens. Just endless like grain, all that fun stuff. So I mean, it just helps give it that cinematic quality that takes it to that next level. It's part of like adding all these like flares and everything else, like and dirt on the lens. Gets kind of cuts it away from the the digital aspect. So in the bloom here, I'm just showing you like there's these flares on the bloom that you can create. And in here, by adjusting the variations of intensity of that bloom, you can get a secondary flare that's happening, which is really cool. And this is like more of an anamorphic flare, uh, which is really cool too. Again, it makes it more cinematic. It's all about like where how much how many flares do you want to put in it? Seeing that even that by doing it here, it affected the sun itself, which is cool. And you can just lower this down if it's a bit too much. It also has keys on it. The far right, those are keys, so you can animate it if you want. Just say that you want it to be lower when the sun's in the shot, but when you want it to be more intense when the ship is there. Um, this by keying it here, by changing the intensity here, uh, you can adjust that. Um, Again, and you see it all happen in real time, and this is just ridiculous. that it's this cool and this and instant gratification. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of flares going on there, but I'm a big fan of flares if it works. So I noticed this one is a little bit. Yeah, I need to pull this over a bit so it's not happening too early. The sun, meaning the flare in the sun. So yeah, it's just you go in and you tweak it where you want it. Again, it's a fun process because it's not like having to render it out, bring it into a compositing program, and adding all these things on top of it, and then going back and forth. It's like you're seeing it happen while you're doing it, which streamlines this process. It speeds it up. It makes it more creative, and in a lot of ways, you get it completely done by that point. So the ship itself, we actually have this blueprint that was created, and there's effects on that. That's coming off the engine. These were effects that also got off the marketplace. Um, and the marketplace, a lot of times it's almost like when you're Googling for anything uh, online, like reference, then the marketplace has so many assets that you can actually just type in like engine engine glow or engine flare or uh, engine exhaust, and you'll find a bunch of stuff, and you just find the best one that works. And then some of them are free, some of them uh, you have to purchase, but they don't cost much. I mean, it's amazing how you can do so much for so little. To be quite honest. So, it's always good. I'm just, saving this out. Always make sure that you save your process. If you, and that this is saving it through Perforce. If you don't save it, it has a tendency to crash. So, if you get into really complex scenes. All right. So let's talk about how this environment was created, the entire landscape. Now, there's different ways of creating landscapes in Unreal Engine. I'm going to go through the methods of how I created this environment, and this, and the thinking behind it, which is really important. We're actually starting to build a world like this that is going to be able to tell a story. So this just kind of shows how I laid out the environment from above all the way down to the ground into the cave. And it was something that was I knew when I was creating it that there was going to be something that I was going to need to have some inspiration. So inspiration and reference is always a great place to start. So what I always do before I start something is a project at all is I'll end up putting together reference either from the internet, from projects that I love. These are images from Prometheus. Um, they're rather dark, so I apologize for that. There's reference in the documentation on this. But the main goal here is really as an artist, as a creator, a director, is like looking at reference or inspiration to uh, get an idea what you're going to create. And I feel this is very important through all processes of making your story. So anytime that you're actually dealing with lighting, environments, characters, story, editing, reference is always a great place to start. You don't want to really go in blind because you may waste a lot of time and be unhappy in the results. Um, Looking at that reference, from Prometheus, we're not going to exactly copy it. It's a means of kind of getting an idea, mood, feeling, lighting, and how I want the landscape to maybe be broken up, by having these kind of jagged cliffs. They didn't really have that in Prometheus, but I felt like I wanted to create my own world. So that's the fun about designing in Unreal is you can use, basically an idea reference, and then I'm showing you here is Megascans is creating all of the landscapes, the rocks, the world, the ground, and some of these other things like these mountains. Those were actually from TurboSquid. So what's great about Unreal Engine 5 is that you can use these really detailed models. And so I just typed in scan mountains, when I went to, just to see what's there, because I thought instead of sculpting it from scratch, I don't have time. I have 6 weeks and I want something unique and different, but also I want it to feel very real. So looking at scan data is always a great place to start. Megascans has a lot of a big library as well, but when it comes to these big mountains, I found like this one was called Star Wars Mountain. I just loved the texture of it. I felt it looked kind of otherworldly. And I thought, oh yeah, this is going to work. I saw the amount of detail that's in it. And I ended up purchasing that and using that for these mountains. And I, warped them and distorted them to get the points I wanted. So I didn't use it one-to-one, but you can see it's down there, the texture. These are all the same pieces. I just duplicated and rotated and kind of merged them together in places. It's made for like a really kind of cool and alien looking landscape that, I felt very real, but also it had all the details I wanted. It didn't feel, procedural in a lot of ways, which, a lot of times if you do just a landscape background or as a base, it can have a tendency to look very procedural. And when you're from a distance, you can see the patterns. So, so all of these like different components, are various aspects of, this is some of these mountains here in the background. Those were from another library that I found in the marketplace. Various collections that you could, I find myself building and collecting assets, so I can actually just go into my library and find what I need. So this particular one is come from Brushify. Brushify is a really great resource for landscapes. I use components of Brushify quite a bit in all of my projects. So these are basically their distance meshes, and it just kind of breaks up the background without adding too much detail. And I feel like, the detail that's in there is pretty decent for, especially for a distance. It's not too heavy, but it also has enough detail and fidelity. It doesn't look like a low poly. Granted that most of these distant mountains are going to be in kind of a mist or kind of haze. I still wanted there to be a realism. So you can see in the distance how it kind of breaks up on the edges and stuff. So when it comes to even some of these shapes here, this is like one of those mountains, but you can see I added another piece on top, and it's actually the same piece. It's just shrunk down to vary the shapes really. So it's not just the same, shape when I duplicate and rotate it around that you notice the tops always look the same. So that's another cheat to be able to use. It's really quick. Is instead of going in and ZBrush and having to sculpt it out, which you can do and bring it back in, I try to find methods that I could do inside Unreal Engine. So this is, the fly through to the ground. There was a lot of components here that I had to think about. I wanted this to feel like there's, kind of this area where the ship would be located. The drone would be located kind of trapped inside this little canyon area. So I'm going through right now is just showing you the skybox. So the skybox, there's a bunch of great skyboxes you can get on Unreal Engine Marketplace. You just type in skybox or sky, and there's a variety. This one I like. It's basically set up to be animated. And you can change out, so there's an image there, but you can also change out the contrast, the brightness. And I started playing with this just to see, I didn't want the sky to be too bright. I wanted it to feel like I wanted to see texture in the sky, but I didn't want it to be distracting from the actual landscape itself. There's atmosphere, sky atmosphere that's to create like a bit of a haze back there. We have also exponential fog, height fog, which also adds a layer of haze and fog. You can create volumetrics with this, which is great. So you can actually get some of the sun glowing. You can get God rays, all kinds of fun stuff that comes with adding volumetrics to your exponential height fog. You can obviously color the fog to tint it any color you want. To kind of I wanted this to feel more like it's almost dust in the air, opposed to what we'd see, just in a green landscape, or this is basically almost a unlivable, almost toxic environment. But you can see here, like just tweaking the colors just of the fog is fairly easy. It's a lot of fun to just mess around with it. Like a fog like this would be like kind of acceptable for another scene or something like that. That felt like it had a lot of great breathable oxygen. But my goal here was to make it feel slightly toxic, and that's when we get into our character, that's why she's wearing a mask. She can't breathe. So these other components here that add a layer of texture to the environment are their particle system. And what's really cool about them is this is a series of particles that I was able to manipulate. But again, it started as a download from the marketplace, and then I added lightning inside the particles so it would create these areas of energy coming on and off, almost sparking like. And because the idea is this particular element that we see here, I knew I wanted it to be a life form that is the thing that tells our story, that has the ability to change time once it goes over something. It's kind of an intelligent life form. Then we have the other just ambient particles. These are just specks in the air like dust. And again, none of this was created from scratch. It's all stuff you can find on the marketplace. So it's exciting how accessible all of this is as an artist, as a filmmaker, to be able to just download elements and put it together and quickly make your story or your world. So all of this, are all the just different elements. Like here's dust here. This is just another element of, and all these layers create the realism for a scene. That make it feel like there's an ecosystem to some extent. This is a slightly deadly ecosystem, but one that actually feels like it's real. It has all the elements that make something feel like it's actually a real world. Okay, so I just opened up a new scene. I'm going to start from scratch and I'm going to show you how I created that world we just saw from scratch. So this is just your base scene in Unreal Engine 5, and basically it's set up with a sky dome that you can actually mess around with. The sunrise, which is great. It actually acts as real lighting in the real world based on the time of day. So this little device here, you can just rotate around. And so what I end up doing is using like this it's just a floor here. Comes with a standard, so it's like I basically have my ground. I could start with a landscape, and in some scenarios I do, but I'm going to show you how to do it without a landscape, just kind of from using various Megascan elements. This is just all the different things like the sky dome, the clouds. We'll change out all the stuff like the clouds and get rid of the text that's down there. The game, play. We don't really need that. Now this volumetric cloud, you can adjust that. It's actually all adjustable. I personally don't feel it looks real, so I don't use it in any of my scenes yet. I think it will get there, so I just kind of delete it. I think we'll end up putting, like I said, a sky dome in there that has more photographs and a bit more realism. So just kind of start like a clean sky and get rid of all the excess stuff. I actually want to keep it as simple as possible to begin with. Um, and then I have my Megascan library that is quite extensive, and I start, so you can download this in the engine, which is great, or you can migrate it into the scene. Right now, I'm just going to put in my sky dome, just so I can kind of get an idea, a feel of. So this is similar to the one that we looked at before. It's actually the same one. So I did a little pre-save, a preset of like all the elements. So what comes with a lot of these sky domes is it kind of has a mesh that's the sphere. If it doesn't, then you can create you can just project a lot of these onto a sphere and make it the scale you want it to be. Some of these, have like the sky is fairly uh, fairly high on its horizon, where there's a horizon line. So being able to adjust the scale or, to make this bigger, because I know I'm going to have a long landscape, but also just I want to be able to translate this down so the horizon line is even lower. When I actually get into building the world, I don't want to, I want the clouds to actually be on the edge. So I may scale it down a little further than what was intended, but this just gives me an idea because there's a little bit of haze on the edge, and I can imagine that once we start building our environment, I can scale this up, move it, translate it, however, and adjust the intensity. But at least this, gives me, as I'm working, kind of like a background to kind of when I'm building my world, I'm not just looking against just a generic blue sky or the volumetric clouds or any of that. But this has like a texture map in it and the shader, so you can adjust that if you ever want to. It's a simple shader here material that basically animates, and then you can break it down and see how it's set up it's all plugged into the emissive, so it actually is self-illuminating. But if you want to break it down, any of this stuff, that's honestly a great way to learn, is to, instead of starting from scratch and doing a lot of manual build of this stuff, is see what other people have done. And that's what I do quite a bit is I'll bring something in and reverse engineer it, or add to it, or adjust it. But at least then that way I have a better understanding of how it actually functions, how it was created. And then I know how I can modify it or how I can make my own. So I highly recommend that on every level when you're actually creating anything. So, all right, so we're taking that platform, the floor, and just scale it up to basically the length of where I'm going to go with horizon right now. And this is basically just giving me an idea of the height of the sky, the horizon line, and just where everything's going to line up as I'm going. All right, so let's open up the Megascans, my Megascans library, and I'm just going to find a base floor. Just something before we get into the big mountains and rocks and all that stuff. I want to create a base. Now, like I said, we could do this with a landscape, which I won't really get into on this because it's its own beast. And for what a lot of the stuff I create, I end up going more in this route where I create a landscape from various rocks that I can control. Again, it's so I can have a high fidelity of coming up close, and also the way that nanite works in here too is that it's not going to impact the graphics card too much, the memory. All right, so I found I think this is a good one here. So it's kind of flat. It's broken up. It's nice, nicely broken up. Again, you can see this Icelandic rock, and so what I end up doing is once I have one I like, I kind of basically duplicate it, rotate it, move it over. And it's really easy to do. It's, copy paste, rotate around, move it over, and just continue this process. And it may seem, wow, that's a lot of work. But what you do is you just do it a few times like this, and then you can grab a whole bunch and that you create and duplicate it, and then do that on a larger scale. But at least this gives you an idea, like how easy it is to take one rock, rotate it around, and not see that there's a complete pattern yet. And if there is, then you can adjust it, and it'll add rocks on top too. So, which I'm not too worried about. But I want this. I know this ground here that I'm going to have a character. I want to make sure that the scale is correct. So it's always good to put in, a character, and might as well just use the mannequin that comes with Unreal, because it's basically 6-foot character. So you can just imagine like this is a good reference. So as you're building, it's like, okay, is this scale right to my character? So this is always very important. You want to make sure that you're building something that will hold up. Like if we have a shot like this, where we're closer to the feet, closer to the ground. All this is really important to make sure that we can create a realistic terrain that feels like it's the right scale. So when I zoomed in there, I realized it felt like it was maybe a bit too big for the detail of the rocks. So just, now that I have a character in there for scale, I take that and I was able to take the entire group and scale it. And I'll put this person, this mannequin down on the ground and see if that feels a little bit more in line with where I'm going to go. And then, again, some of this is like, you don't have to be mathematically correct with the scale of rock based on how it was really created. It's really your eye, what you want it to feel like and what it to look like. But I actually highly recommend, like I said before, looking at reference, because if it's something new to you creating this, then you may not understand what the end result is that you want to create. So, like I said, I just grabbed that whole section, duplicate it. Now I rotate it around. So this is how we'll just continue this process all the way through till we make basically the landscape. And there will be, at a certain point, you'll see a pattern, no matter how you actually rotate it, because we're only using this particular one. But this is only the start. There'll be other rocks, other shapes, and elements put in here that break that up. But this way, I know that this ground is going to hold up well as I move forward on any direction, as well as close up and far away. So just again, you have to be patient with this. It may feel like is this like a lot of effort that everybody has their techniques on how they create a landscape. And what I'm just showing you here is how do I create the landscape for the iCalend deck, and how I do it for most of my projects that I'm especially going to be in tight with the character. I always start where that character is going to be, kind of in the center of the world, because I know that's where the action is going to be. That's going to make it easier for bringing in other assets. You can always translate them wherever, but it's sometimes harder to find if you started like in world space. It's like miles away from the actual location that you're actually going to spend a lot of time in. All right, so now let's select this entire group now that I've created this chunk and duplicate that. And just, it's easy, just duplicate, translate, rotate. There's hotkeys for this, but there's also the controls up above. You see my cursor occasionally moving up there to select either the rotate, translate, or scale. So this is all real time, me creating this. So you can see it hasn't really taken that much time to just lay out a ground is what I'm calling this. And this is just like the basic foundation. Um, Knowing that, part of the reason of having like this floor to start with is knowing that all as you add these and you manipulate them, that you're always staying level. I mean, a lot of times you never use the Z, which is actually opposite of what it is in most programs, which is usually um, Y for going up and down. It's Z in Unreal. But now I get down lower to see, okay, this is where I'm going to spend some time with this character. Does that seem right as far as like the horizon? Now, make sure you always save. So, when you're working with a group, especially at the beginning, there's these development folders, which are really cool. And so creating uh, your own develop folder in there as you actually kind of work in a sandbox is always good, especially when you're in a group, like I said, with that's working on the same project. And then once you're happy with it, that can get saved into a main area, a main level that everybody can use. But this is one way. Sometimes we'll work offline on another project and migrate it in, but um, a lot of times you don't have that luxury, especially when you have very limited time. All right, so now that we have basic terrain, and obviously I'd go a lot further with this. I'm trying to bring in other rocks from Megascans just to see like, okay, here's some other jagged shaped rocks. It's going to break up the horizon, but also add a bit more of texture to our world itself. And Quixel I think is something that is very it's such a great resource, and it's so easy, and it's embedded in Unreal Engine 5 that you can access all of this inside to get all these assets. Just and I'll show you that here in a second. Um, but basically, it's again it's the same thing. It's like, okay, I like this shape, and I'm going to see how many times I can use this one to. So here's actually what I was just talking about. So inside inside Unreal, you can actually access Quixel, which is all the Megascan library. Now you need to log in, with your login, but it's like an endless supply of resources that are just at your fingertips, and that's what's makes it so powerful when you're trying to like create something opposed to having to ever exit the program. I mean, that's what the beauty of Unreal has become, is that I'm finding more and more stuff that I never have to click out of Unreal. It's like a virtual world that I can create anything I want. But what's great is that they have these libraries for different areas, and so finding different either surfaces or actual geo, it's all accessible here. And all you do is just once you like it, you click on it, you download it here. Once it's downloaded, um, then you just add it to your scene. So here, let's download this. All right, there it is. Now we can just add, and that was quick, and we can just add it to our scene. So there it is. Now it's added to the scene. So that's how you can add it to your scene, and now I can drag and drop it right into any place that I want inside the scene I'm building. So it's just that easy, really. And there's different modes or different resolutions too. You can this one it's not going to be as close to my character, so I just download a medium. But you can download the highest resolution. You can also download nanite, and you can also convert these to nanite after the fact. And so what I'm doing here is like now that when you have different rocks, you want to make sure that they don't, look, they stand out like a sore thumb. So playing with the values in the shader, which is really easy, you can just open up the color, the surface, the saturation, and just adjust it to your needs to where it will match the surrounding area around it. Another way, sometimes it's hard to see because with the lighting. So if you just do it with you turn lighting off, and it's basically just unlit. This is where you can really see if it's going to match up, and sometimes the lighting can be deceiving. So adjusting this to where you can see it match unlit, and most likely it's going to work in a lit scene. So it's just that easy. It's like, and that's the beauty of it. So you're not stuck with like that color, that texture, uh, that intensity, that saturation that comes in. Everything here is adjustable. All right. So the same thing here is like, there's feeling like now we have this geo. I can kind of just break up this pattern that we see from our first original ground that we actually put down, and use this rock here to just kind of break it up and move it around to help you know get rid of the redundancy that we may see, especially from different angles. And it also just again, it's going to change like the height if we want to. Um, the scale. Just either further away because again, a lot of these rocks are not. They may actually be smaller rocks, but in a distance, they may actually hold up as a larger piece of ground or a rock or a cliff or mountain. So just trying some other like rocks in here, and that one actually has a few rocks embedded in it, so it kind of breaks up the surface and color. And this one, we'll want to adjust the values too, so it matches a bit better because it's not right now. It's a little too warm and a little too dark. But I do like the fact that there's little other bits of rocks in there, so that adds another layer of texture. And so what's good about like a rock like this too is that it's easy, like I said, to adjust it to match the actual values that's around it. But these little bits here, instead of adding individual rocks for that, there's a few of these like this in Megascans that there's a whole ground that basically has various rock sizes. So taking that ground, just scaling it up. And what I'm trying to do now is fill in kind of the further away areas. So some of the stuff that'd be using close up again, like I'm changing it and it looks completely different by just stretching it in the Z. And just do, now that I have that, this is going to help break up the horizon here from this angle. That way that has more of a jagged horizon opposed to just a flat quality to it. And we'll just continue that throughout all the way around so that we can actually make sure that from any angle that the camera moves, then we won't be seeing just something that's that we'll have to fix later. But there is some thinking behind that too. So I don't overbuild a lot of stuff of things I'm not going to see. So while I'm creating this, I'm thinking about how I'm going to tell my story, where the interest of the camera, the story is going to play, and then as things are in the distance, I may apply some things in there, but also I may also put the camera and start doing some basic editing storytelling that way, which we'll get into later. And if I see an area that needs some work, this is what makes this actually easy, because say that later on you um, wanted to change, like because there's something you don't want to see or something you do want to see in the distance, then it's easy to take one of these rocks and just move it into that position to either hide or showcase something you wanted to see. So by having these all individual like this makes it easy to quickly move around and rotate and change. So so right now I'm taking the kind of the same rocks, rotating them, duplicating them, and this particular one is the one that's on the foreground. It's and it looks quite a bit different when you actually scale it up like that, and you actually change its shape by either going flatter or raising its height. So I mean, it hasn't been long, but we've almost created the entire environment here. At least the foreground part that and into the background, and we'll continue this, till it seems like it's in a good place from all angles. And so I haven't really, what's great about this is putting all these elements in here, and I didn't really adjust any of the lights. This is just the basic directional sunlight. Um, there's a bit of there's really nothing else in this. There's not true atmosphere. There's not. Um, this is just the bare minimum of of what's needed for this. But what's great about it is that you're seeing it already feels real, um, and that's very powerful when you're actually making a world, and so you're seeing it and you know that okay, this works. Here's the basic lighting. I'll be changing the lighting, but at least I know that it looks good. It looks good enough to where I'm not guessing. And I feel in traditional other software that you'd have to build it, texture it, light it, wait for it. There's a lot of back and forth, and it's not as creative. This is just, to me, this is like being a kid, in a sandbox and being able to do anything you want. This is just building worlds is something that always interested me when visual effects started, but I always felt it was daunting. Now I feel like with Unreal, it's become this uh, easily accessible way for artists to create anything they want as quick as they want, and not be bogged down by the technical aspects and just be artist. So just filling in these little areas here that just so that we don't have any dead spots. Again, we'll probably, like I said, we have the camera that kind of comes in and goes, from a distance and then also comes in close. So we want to make sure that, we're not, when we're building this, we're not always staying low to the ground. I like to, when I'm building, I do like to be a little lower or closer to where the camera's going to be at the beginning so I can see like if it's working. I'm also imagining as I'm building it, like where the cameras are going to be. So it is helpful to, when you first start building, like to think about those elements as you're going, so you don't do a lot of work from above like this early on, and then realize it doesn't look good, and you have to start all over later. This is easy enough to do after the fact to build these components by duplicating it just to fill in the areas that are um, not as close to our actor. So what I'm doing here is just building kind of a canyon area. This is kind of a canyon that will kind of stay within. And this is what I was saying before, where eventually there'd be a cave, the mountains around. But I wanted to have a basic area where a character's going to walk around and have to do her thing. So just building this out. So that, again, that's now we see it from every angle. Looks pretty cool. It was just, again, this is just mega scans. There's nothing that had to be purchased for this. So this is easy for anybody out there if they just want to create something like this. Um, it doesn't take much. So now I'm just seeing if I can break up some of these bigger rocks just for some height. Because again, I want this to feel like it's a terrain that it's not going to be as easy to get around if um, past this canyon area. So in the distance or whatever, you can have more jagged rocks everywhere. All right, so let's add a some fog in here. This is going to help by adding the exponential height fog. You can actually now start to see depth. This is going to help us give an idea of what it looks like with atmosphere and with haze. So, like I said, it comes in kind of as a white fog. I'm adding a warmth to it, so it feels like it's unbreathable air and maybe full of dust. So you can change these colors in any way you need to. The fog itself, the intensity, the fall off here. Um, there's a height to it too, so that if you just want it to be on the horizon, so you can play with that. Let's activate the volumetric, which also once you do that, it changes what you just did at the very top node. But this gives you a lot more control. So it's you don't want to go too saturated with the color sometimes because it will feel as not as realistic as it should. So how I work is just kind of in a subtle way as I go, and then I continue to push until I get where I need. Um, so just got rid of that really. So now playing with the atmosphere, playing with the atmosphere here. This is a control that I sometimes use and sometimes don't. This gives you another layer of. It's also fog, but it's also like overall color intensity of the light in the environment and how it's affecting based on atmosphere. Um, what I like to do too is organize my stuff as I'm going. So I create all like the entire landscape, put it into a folder I called landscape, and selected them all and put them into a folder because this can become very daunting when you're actually in your uh, world outliner. The world outliner really is kind of like where you see all your components and where everything is set up. Um, and then as you click on things in the world outliner, then anything in there, then um, there's a detail panel down below that shows that component. And obviously you can adjust it. So the skybox I just clicked off just to see like if there's anything else back there that I want to adjust. Because sometimes the clouds can almost feel like it's a mountain or something like that and be deceiving. So just click that off so I can start to adjust a few of the other elements of the exponential height fog. All right, so there we do. We have just a basic, again, we'll adjust this as we go. Like we want to go more intense later. Um, Here just kind of shows you the height. Like so, like I was saying, if you want it to be lower on the horizon, or if you want it to be higher, the density. There's a lot of adjustments. It's really to your eye, your flavor, your your interest, what you want to achieve here. So sometimes what I'll do is like I show you, if it can become very bright, like especially the volumetric, and I don't want it to be that bright, so I just darkened it. It's still warm, but by darkening the value there, it still acts as volumetric, so the light, you'll get the glows off the light, but it won't be blooming so much that it's overpowering. So that's another uh, trick I do with just kind of getting it gets for the especially for an environment like this. And now I'm moving the sun just to see like where do I want the light to be. Now that we kind of built the basic idea, so I want this to be like the whole horizon, long shadows, like you see the long shadows there. And again, we'll get into lighting later, but this is always good, and this is what I think is important as you're building your world and building anything in Unreal is that you kind of have a greater knowledge of everything, the lighting, atmosphere, not just the doing rocks and just saying oh it looks cool, without understanding what the end result's going to be, because that'll change. Obviously it'll be something that once you get into lighting, if you didn't think about it here, then it will be something that um, you'll have to adjust later. So I selected all the geo and I made it movable, which is basically dynamic lighting. So that means that if there's a lot of movement in it, we don't have to bake lighting. There's no more baking that I apply to any of my scenes in Unreal Engine. I always use dynamic lighting for everything. Now this source angle right here, I'm just showing you is kind of the softness of the shadow. Um, and this, again, like as I'm building this environment, it's helping. It's like, why waste a lot of time on lighting? It's good to do some basic stuff here, because you'll see if some of the geo, the rocks, the character is going to work in this environment once you start to go back and commit to lighting. All right, now we put our sky back in so we can kind of see the atmosphere along with the sky and clouds, and kind of fleshing out where it's going to go. Now you can see some of those rocks that because they're in the atmosphere, they're further back, that they actually hold up even better, because they may not be intended to be these the size I've made them, but they have nice broken up edges, and that's what I really want for this environment, to have like this kind of jagged kind of quality. Rand, you want to start thinking about like elements of like erosion, like from wind in an environment like this. You would think that a lot of the rocks may be actually softer because of that, but that has a tendency to look CG, or it looks less interesting to the eye. So I either you throw the logic out there, or you come up with your own logic based on what you want to achieve. But again, look at reference, find things, because there's a lot of deserts that have like really jagged rocks. So I feel it's justified. It's really to your pleasure, or whatever your interest. So now I'm bringing in the scan rocks, or mountains, that I purchased from Turbo Squid. These are the Star Wars mountains, and scale them up, bring them in. And so I think what's great is it's for when it comes to these materials too. It's really easy. It's like you don't have to do too much. It's rocks. It's not going to have a lot of unless there's rain on it. It's going to be fairly dry. So um, it's an easy setup. What you'll find sometimes too here is that sometimes the center, when you bring in objects, the pivot is off. So by hitting Alt and middle mouse key, uh, you can actually you can move that component over, that pivot, so it's centered. So now that when you scale it up and rotate it, it, it'll happen in the center opposed to somewhere else. It's very annoying that you can't even find where the center is. Um, so now that I've created one, I now duplicate it, rotate it around, scale it up. It's the same as what we were doing with the foreground rocks, but doing this on the huge mountains or huge rock faces. So I'm just quickly just rotating them around. This is not part of what I was, the idea, and the thinking of this is that I'm creating um, a kind of a canyon area for a character to be in. So they're surrounded by these big rocks and big mountains. Um, just seeing if some of these other ones, like we'll just break up the other rocks that we put in from mega scans to kind of break up like a mid ground, still a distance, but it's to kind of so we don't have this hard edge ground underneath the big mountain, but there's a layer to it because this particular mountain, which you can adjust, and I did actually to duplicate, rotate, and find areas. I may turn it on its side, all that stuff to get less of that just edge hitting the edge of the horizon. So this is really playing around. It's like thinking about okay, when I'm creating this, like what do I want to see in the horizon? I want to see sky. I want to see at least a bit of sky. I want to see these rock faces. But also, some can be closer, some can be further away. So it's really creating um, layers is really what I'm trying to do here. And just continue to play around in your sandbox and make kind of the world you want. So the thing here is like I'm just selecting many this fast way and just duplicate a few of them over. Um, Part of it is like just really finding that kind of horizon. What you want to see? This it's got a really cool shape there, but some of the angles are working. So you see weird gaps, things like that. So all right, so I just want to brighten up the sun just to see kind of where the shadows would lay, which direction. Um, Again, it's a good idea. Like so you as you're building, you don't want to just not think about lighting. You want to just keep trying to understand like what are you trying to create here as you're building it. And then eventually we'll, after we get all this done, the sky itself, we can warm that up too, so it feels more like dusty sky. It all kind of comes together. Start to build all these components um, and manipulate them in ways that just right now I'm just trying to create an appealing look to the horizon. Um, and as I start to develop, you know, the story, then like I said, what I end up doing is moving things around based on the camera because of the interest of either where the sun is at, where it's hitting, or something really want to showcase that makes it kind of an epic or compelling visual. And just kind of continue this process, building uh, out the entire area until you basically get to, once you start adjusting the lighting and everything else and building out and darken the sky, adding mood to it, then it starts fleshing it out. And this is, basically after a bit of, tweaking and here and there, and putting some of those rocks that you saw in the distance, the mountains, and how I kind of group them together to create a canyon, um, allowed for this to have like a really kind of interesting area of focus that I'll be spending most of my time in. Now, there's also, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but I just wanted to show you like some of the elements that when I'm lighting stuff even early on, I'll use. This is again a Brushify shader, but it's a material for the sky itself, for the sun, and you attach this to the directional light. And there's a light function that you see there. It's like there's different modes. There's like fast clouds, slow clouds, static, all that stuff. But I like to have movement in my clouds, especially for these, just so because it creates life. Um, and also, it feels more real, but it's nice to have shadows that just kind of pass through because a scene. So it's not just the shadows of the mountains that are creating these larger shadows. So as we pull out, this is after a lot of work of building those mountains and ground and continuing to build out the entire world. You take what we did there, what we just talked about, and you just scale it to um, the entire world. And what I'll end up doing is, like I said, I'll find an area that I focus on, duplicate, rotate, move around, and then those distant mountains in the distance, you see back there, we talked about those earlier. That's also in the Brushify library. And you really start to play around with like the colors and the atmosphere to get the mood you want. Um, and and then you start to this creating a sequencer, which we'll get into a bit later in the animation sequence. But you set up your world by putting your ship and making sure everything is working and functioning. So yeah, that's pretty much how I built this landscape.